You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael, and with me always is my good friend
Jay, formerly from the AK.
And how goes it tonight?
Now that we're getting into the doldrums of summer, and I thought this would be the hottest time of the year.
Which it is. In my house it is.
Michael, it is so hot outside, I feel like I can get sunburn even locking in the closet. If I was locked in the closet, I would be burned to a crisp. This has been a record, August, July here in Texas. It's unbelievable for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a record year here as well. Like we were at 124 or something yesterday. It was insane.
Yes, and I know it's a little odd. Once again, I'm complaining to you about the heat here, but being, like I said, formerly from the AK, where a hot day in Alaska, if it gets over 80 degrees, we sell out of every ceiling fan, every fan. But we don't get air conditioning, but every fan sells out of every store once it hits 80, and that may be for a couple of days during the summer. And other than that, it goes back down to like 60 degrees.
Right.
So to have all of July and most of August to be 100 degrees every day, yeah,
I'm just not troublesome.
Yeah.
Whew. No, I hear you. Well, some exciting news. I was able to come down to Texas and visit you.
Yeah, it was very.
I think
very
I
nice.
left. I think I left my voice down when I was down there.
Yes, you did.
I picked up a little bit of a cold, but we're trying to
a cold during summer heat. I love that.
I know. It was from lack of
over here in Texas.
It was from lack of sleep and probably inhaling CA glue and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, well, we did stay up a little late and getting up early, and in fact, we did a little flying despite the heat. We actually had a couple of nice cloudy days and got a little flying in.
Yep, absolutely. I got to come down and check out your new field.
Yeah.
I was a little sad I didn't get to meet Jim and the guys, but
no, unfortunately, their schedules didn't allow it. But maybe next time. There's many more opportunities.
Sure. Well, I had some work that had to be completed down in Dallas, and it was easy just to kind of fly through the little neighborhood there and stop off. So it was a good time. The field is impressive, though. I like it. It's very. It's kind of tucked back in this little bowl, and it's got nice grass on it. And you got a what'd you call that? A windsock for the guys there too. We installed that. That was pretty neat. It's up on a big tall pole and tells us which direction to fly. I didn't get to see any of those spinning alpacas or whatever you're talking about, but
yeah, they were hiding. Probably in the shade, staying out of the heat, like good common sense animals.
Yes, and it was a little hot there, so I totally get it. But we got to fly your wing.
We did.
That was pretty fun.
And I did happen to. You got me inspired. You showed up, and of course, just so everybody understands, I still haven't unpacked all my planes as of yet. So Mike shows up. I get a little excited. I knew he was coming down, so I pulled a plane or two out of the. I sent a bunch of planes that I've bought, and I haven't put them together. And I kind of kept them that way. So when Mike showed up, I kind of pulled them out and we assembled them while he was here, or I had pre-assembled one or two of them. We made a few. So
yeah. So the big one was your riffraff.
Yes.
You put together your riffraff, which was mostly done when I got there.
Yeah, it really was a fairly. I mean, that was half an evening to put that together.
Right. But then you brought out this box that you've had for quite some time. And
yes. Yes.
Very, very similar to me. You buy stuff and then it goes into the closet and and then you're like, hey, Mike's coming over. Let's build this.
Yeah. Well, when I got it, I knew that I was going to put it together, but I knew I was going to be moving sometime. Just how it goes with moving. You might move in a month, you might move in a year. And I just put it aside and I said, well, I'll just keep this in a box. And when I get to Texas, then I'll just put it together there. And sure enough, you were coming. I knew I had all the parts were all in the box. So you got here and I said, well, this shouldn't be. How hard will this be to put together? And not to say it was too terribly hard, but
no.
for the folks at home, you got to understand, since I don't have my old shop and have my benches the way I like them and know where all my tools are, so I have tools in one box and tools in some other pieces that I need that are in my clothing box or my shoe box. Who knows? So it was quite literally, look, you just open a box and hopefully there might be some stuff in there you could use or a tool you might find. So putting this thing together was actually it's kind of humorous.
And that's actually a good topic for tonight is toolbox or tools for your RC shop.
Oh, hey, that's a good segue. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, because we're talking about this airplane and we're going to touch on all these tools that would have made our lives a whole lot easier.
Yeah, sure. we made do, taping some things together. But yeah,
right. Well, so the airplane that you had is a Hyperion. It's been discontinued, but it's a Stuka, right?
I want to say it's been discontinued for about 4 years.
Okay.
Not to say it's been sitting in my box for 4 years. It was one of those things I bought it off a club member, like I said, just before I came down. It's been sitting in my closet for a year or so. He had it for several years, one of those type of things. So,
right.
It's a beautiful kit, but it's not like we're going to be able to get parts for it.
Yeah, it's a one-time thing.
It's a one-time thing, so yeah.
Put it together, make sure it fits, and so the first thing is it's a very large airplane.
Yeah,
it's
not. I want to say it's maybe a 46-inch wingspan, 46, 48.
What? How big is your P-51? It's about the same size.
About the same size as that. Yeah,
that's more like a 58, right?
Yeah, I don't. Inch, a mile.
48 sounds a little small. I think it's more like a 50, 52 to 50.
Okay, well,
we'll settle on 55.
You might be right. I guess we should look that up. Oh, we'll have it in the notes anyway.
Yeah, no doubt. But it's balsa wood.
Yes,
and it's got a different covering on it than normal.
Yeah, it has the covering that it has. Unlike like a typical monocoat, it's just one color. This one is actually it's printed with all the markings and lines and rivets are all on the covering. So it's kind of neat because it gives you a lot of detail. But I can see a potential problem with this. If you kind of hang a rash or maybe you had a minor crash or mishap, you could just reslap on some monocoat the same color. You can't see it. This one, if you have a crash or a tear, even though you may fix the model, it's not like you can just repair that part of the monocoat that got damaged because it has so much detail in the printing of that, of the wing or of that part of the fuselage. So I can see that as being a little bit of a downfall, but otherwise in this new state that it's in, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is pretty impressive. It feels almost like a little paper. But it doesn't react like paper. It reacts.
No, it might be. It might be a cloth, like a linen cloth, like kind of like a dollar bill. People think dollar bills are paper, but they're not actually paper. They're a linen.
Right. Well, it's impressive either way. It works a lot like monocoat. It seals like it. It looks very, very clean and very detailed.
Yes,
it's got rivets and. It's got some wear marks and that kind of thing. So it is pretty impressive. And I know there's another company out there experimenting with some of this stuff. So we might see that more on the market here.
Right. Like I said, Mike, it's a beautiful covering. The only thing I can say to our viewers or listeners is that if you have a mishap or, you get, tear it or that usual rough housing of it or something, it's going to be a hassle to get new covering, and then you'd have to line it up just perfect in order to iron it back down. So that's the only fault I can see of this stuff.
Right. Well, so we unboxed it. It's got a fiberglass cowl that's really big. It's got wire landing gear the Stuka actually doesn't have retractable gear. It has regular gear.
Right.
So there's fiberglass covers for the gear.
Right.
The wings were really impressive. They have like a little gull wing type look to it.
A-gull type.
Kind of like the Corsair. But the ailerons and the flaps are interesting because they are not attached to the wing like normal ailerons and flaps. They actually stick out from the wing, and they're a little bit lower than the wing.
Right. They remind me like a not a flower,
Fa-
a Fowler flap.
Yeah, Fowler. Right.
And they're both
so
set up
kind
like
of hangs down. Yeah.
Yes. So it's very unusual. And I guess for setting it up, I didn't know this either until you mentioned it. You actually read that in the instructions somewhere. Thank goodness somebody was reading the instructions out of the two of us.
Yeah, no doubt.
If you set it up like you would a normal setup where it's even with the wing, that's not right? You had to set it up with the highlight of the wing overall.
Correct. Yeah. Well, there was a little inboard flapperon looking thing that didn't move. And the way that's set up, it's like a natural tendency to want to even your flap with that flap and then even or match that with your flap and then match the aileron with the flap. And if you did that, it caused, if you looked down the chord of the wing, it caused the flap and the aileron to actually be above the trailing edge of the wing. So it created like a spoiler effect.
Right.
And when I was reading some of it, it said these guys had crashed on the very first maiden and they couldn't figure out why. And it's because the airplane was very unstable with these spoilers. They couldn't get any lift. And every time they tried to turn, it just, it would kind of just cartwheel out of whatever the turn was. And finally somebody said, hey, you're supposed to set up the ailerons and the flaps with the trailing edge where it's equal to the trailing edge of the wing, not that little flap section that's permanently attached to the inboard. So when I read that, and then I finally got them all set up, they don't look like they're, tilted
level,
up,
yeah.
but they don't match to the other ones. So it's kind of like, why doesn't that match? But they match with the trailing edge of the wing, so it'll give it a little bit more performance.
Well, it's going to be interesting because luckily, I happen to have a receiver where I didn't Y all the connections. We were able to have everything on its own channel, and definitely for this particular model, you need to have. So, what was that? A total of 8. I gave you an 8-channel. An 8-channel or a 9-channel
8 channels
receiver.
Right.
And basically, you were able to use almost all of them, or you used all of them, didn't you?
Yeah, I didn't use the gear channel.
The gear channel
doesn't have retractable gear, but I was able to use the elevator, rudder, 2 inboard flaps, and 2 outboard ailerons.
Yes,
and the motor.
So, and that's important because I can definitely see, even though we're using the Mark I eyeball to kind of line this all up, I can see once we get it in the air, we're probably going to have a little bit of some trim issues that are definitely going to be, we may not have gotten it right. So we're going to have to retrim it. And by having everything individually done, we'll be able to get that much more trim control as opposed to if it was just wide together, then we were kind of at the mercy of how much Ying we could do. And with this now we can individually set the trim on each one of these. So I like that.
Well, so the first thing I'm going to suggest in the toolbox for building this, incredible Stuka is a Chinese-English dictionary. Because reading the directions on this thing, I screwed up about 2 or 3 times because I'd look at it and go, oh, that's this, and I'd put it together, and then Jay would be like, hey, what about this piece here? Like the elevator. I put the elevator, it's wood, so I cut all of the covering off to allow the wood to touch the wood. I got it all measured up. I stuck it in there, glued it together, and then what does Jay do? He turns around and goes, hey, did you need this? And he holds up the elevator, not the stabilizer part, the front part, but the rear part that moves up and down, the actual elevator. And you had to put that in first.
Right. Yeah. You put it in, then you kind of wiggle it and you get them both in there, and then you glue it, and then you put the hinges on, and then you put it on the hinge while it's together, in front of the rudder. So, yeah. Whoops.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that because the directions weren't totally clear. It just said, put this in there and do that. And I was doing step by step. And then I didn't realize, oh yeah, this won't slide into the hole. Most of them will slide into the hole.
Mike and I, we built a plane. We built a couple of planes. So
one or two.
I could see a beginner making this mistake, but how could 2, experienced guys make some silly mistakes like this? Well, folks, you got to realize we're doing this at 1 or 2 in the morning. And as with my ordering things off of eBay, you really shouldn't order things or work on your models past 12 o'clock at night.
Yes, I can second that.
And, we didn't, there's no clocks where we were kind of like Vegas, right? There was no clocks. There was nothing to tell us the time. We're just kind of talking and having a good old time. And before you know it, he's getting tired because he's been flying all over the country and then shows up at my place. And I'm just kind of going on about doing my thing. And he was making these mistakes, and I wasn't there to catch him because I wasn't really watching what he was doing. I was making my own mistakes somewhere else. But basically, we were up too late. We should have just stopped, got up in the morning, and it would have been fine. Because the second day, we weren't making nearly the mistakes we made that first night. So
no, we already made all the mistakes that we needed to make the first night before we threw in the towel. But it was definitely kind of a little bit of a annoyance, I think, because right after I did that, I glued the rudder on, only to realize that, you're supposed to put the tail wheel into the rudder before you glue the rudder on. Right. So I had to cut the rudder back off and re-glue it all.
Let me tell you, folks, it was funny watching him because he's trying to figure out a way, like, can I get this rod in this rudder, or just pull this one just out enough I can stick this in? And I'm like, it'll never work.
Yeah, so, it was kind of troublesome. So the first thing on my list is basically a very sharp knife. You want to have some sort of a X-Acto knife or one of those what they call the Olfa knives, like I have here, that kind of goes in and out like that. But you want to have something that's really super sharp, because when I put those what kind of hinges, they're not plastic hinges, but they're
like Mylar hinges.
Yeah, they've got like a fabric. You drop CA on them and it wicks in.
And it wicks in.
So, but you can cut them with a very sharp knife. Unfortunately, we didn't have one of those. We had something that had obviously been used several times to cut boxes open.
Yeah. So, hey, once again,
and we had no idea where the new blades were.
I have these tools. They're somewhere, but I have them. And we were just making do with, like, I'd have like an old, X-Acto 10, 11 blade sitting somewhere, and we're just like trying to cut things with that. I did have one of the knives that Mike's talking about, the long flat ones, but it was kind of used, and so it was getting duller and duller as we're getting it down. But I do recommend, definitely for your toolbox, both those knives have a place. The X-Acto knife for making nice precision cuts, but that long flexible blade is great for if you need to flatten something. You have to get in a tight spot, or since you can bend that blade, you can get in somewhere and you can cut something flush. Or you want to follow a pattern or follow the contour or something, that flexible knife it's beautiful and cuts like butter. If you want to get something to follow the contour or something, or to shave foam, it works so well.
Yeah, that's true. And like you said, we just couldn't find the blades, so we were just trying. It was 2:00 in the morning. We weren't going to go look for them, but
well, the good news, they're somewhere in this house.
We just got to dig through some boxes.
Yeah. So I may be ordering more because that may become quicker than me finding them. So
yeah, I'll try them. Probably so. So the second thing is that once I had to cut those hinges off, now I have to figure out how to slot new hinge slots. So they do make a tool for that. It's like a slot cutter for a hinge. You can use your knife for it, but they actually have a little tool. I think Hobbyco makes it, and you can put it on there and just rip it down, and it'll cut a slot for those hinges. I had to go in there and cut, the old hinge out, basically, or make a new one, and then try to get
Mike was
them all
having all sorts of fun.
It made it for a lot more work. Made it for more work for me, and having to, try to do this without screwing everything up. It did get done, by the way, and it looks fabulous, but it just made it more work because I had a dull knife. I didn't have my Chinese English dictionary to tell me, the directions. And the directions weren't all that good anyway. They were kind of picturesque and had, pointed things. And even the screws, we got kind of messed up. We tried to look at, what screw went where. And, that was a little troublesome too, because we didn't have a micrometer or.
Right. Now, I will definitely say the thing about the screws, at least we were able to find a ruler.
We did find a ruler, and it had centimeters on it. So we had to kind of guesstimate, but each one of those, it had like a million screws to it. Because each one of those hinges had screws. And then, there were screws that went into the body and into the cowling and the landing gear. Each one of those were different.
And the instructions weren't exact. Sometimes they said what screw you're supposed to use. But it was almost like a puzzle. It was kind of like,
it didn't have hardly any instructions.
When we got down to the end of the puzzle,
pictures.
you go, what pieces do I have left? Or why do I have these that are a little bit longer than these? They're the same, there may be 2 or 3 millimeter difference between them, but it makes no sense. And then you get to the very end and you go, oh, the longer ones need to be in that piece because it's easier to put together. You can interchange them, but it's a lot easier to assemble it if you use the longer ones over here and the shorter ones should go here. But like I said, it wasn't until we almost got the model done that we were able to figure that out.
Right. Well, and a micrometer or, a little bitty ruler that has millimeters on it, that does help out, and you keep that in your toolbox, and it comes in handy. So anyway, I got this thing, finally started getting it assembled correctly and got my hinges all right and glued all the pieces back together, and it started looking really good. And then we started putting the servos in. And the problem that we ran into is that most models, especially balsa wood models that are pre-built, they have a string that goes from where the where the servos are, and it goes through the wood and then comes out the wing root so that you have some way to pull the wires through. We did not have that.
Nope.
The string wasn't there. So Jay has, this incredible brain and figured out this really cool tool. And you made the tool, though, didn't you?
Yeah, I made it. So it's really easy to put together. So because this isn't the first model I put together that's where they didn't have a string for you to pull the wiring, your servo wiring through or anything, I had gotten some push rods, and one of them that I had was fiberglass, and it was rather thin and very flexible. And the great thing about that was I was able to take it, and then I took a twist tie, stripped off the paper that's on the little twist tie, put some CA on it, wrapped around the fiberglass, put some CA on it so it just locked it in. And it was great because now I can put the wire or whatever I need around that, wrap the twist tie around it, and then I can pull it through things. So first I I'm able to fish the push rod, the fiberglass push rod through the openings, and take your time, do a little bit of jiggling, and you can get it through there. It works very well. And I was able to get it in and out and pull the things through. Now, if that doesn't work, folks, and you don't happen to have a push rod that's really, really flexible like this, you can take a string, you could tape a weight to it or glue a weight to it, put it in the part that you need, grab your vacuum cleaner, put it on, the sucking option, stick it on the other end, and it'll suck the string right through. Now, make sure you have it tied off to something so it doesn't just get sucked off into the vacuum cleaner, but that works as well. And then you don't have to worry about it getting hung up somewhere. It actually gets sucked right in there. That works rather well.
Yeah, I've actually done that once before, and I did what you did. I didn't have it attached to something on the other end and just pulled it right through into the vacuum cleaner. Then I had to go get more string.
Right.
But that's a good one. I've done that, and I've done actually where I put an extension, like an 18-inch extension on there.
Right.
And then I basically just fed it. I turned it up to where gravity would feed it through. That works sometimes if the wing is a bigger wing. Like I have a couple that have actually wing ribs that are hollow. They're not solid.
Right.
And so it kind of just fell through all of them, kind of like a ring, ring toss.
Hey, Mike, so when you put extensions like that together, so how do you like to secure your extensions so they don't pull apart? Because Murphy's Law says that you're going to put it in there, you're going to tug on it, and it's going to pull apart, and you got to do this all over again after you screwed everything down. So
right. And I have had that before, and I've actually had one come loose in flight a long time ago. But there's two ways that I do it. I've kind of changed my way now just because it's an easy in and out. But before, whenever I was flying the foamies and that kind of thing and I had extensions, I would actually take Blenderm tape and wrap the Blenderm tape around the connection.
Okay.
Then I would take one of those twist ties that you're talking about, and I would send it through, the 3 wires on the one side. I would put it through one of those wires and then come around to the other wires, and I would twist it to where now it's got a Blenderm tape and then it's got a wire.
Oh, okay.
However, I will tell you that it's a great idea until that thing is flopping around doing 3D maneuvers and that little metal piece is starting to poke holes in all your monocoat. It doesn't look as good. Don't ask me how I know this. The other thing too is that it does, it'll do some damage to the balsa wood in there too if it's flopping around, because now it's got this wire and the wire scrapes stuff and it pokes holes in the monocoat and it pokes holes in the balsa wood too. So what I did is, nowadays they actually have those plastic clips that you can just slide on.
It's rather nice.
Yeah, and they come in a package of 10 or whatever for like $2. And before, I don't know why I was so resistant before, but I just didn't want to spend the money. But now I'm to the point where if the airplane's large enough and my airplanes are more expensive now, I don't ever want that coming apart, and the plastic will actually not punch holes in your monocoat, when you're out flying. So that's what I do now. I still occasionally, depending on the airplane, I still wrap, the Blenderm around it. But the Blenderm has always been really good for me.
Yeah,
I never had anything come off.
I myself, I've just I liked to use heat shrink. So I want to say it's like maybe 15 or 20 centimeter heat shrink, millimeter, not centimeter. And I would just get that, and I put the two pieces together. I cut a piece that was enough to go over both ends where the wire comes out. Heat shrink them together, and once you do that, it keeps them locked so that they can't come apart. Now, the bad part about that was if you had to do any kind of maintenance or get in there, that means that you had to cut them apart. Once you cut them apart, means you have to go and get another piece, put it back together, heat shrink them back down. But the good part, I've never had one of those fail. That's the good thing about them. So,
no, that's a good idea. I never thought about that. I'm going to have to try that one.
Right.
Especially if it's a tight, something that needs a little bit of a slipperiness. Because I will tell you that the plastic clips and the wire with the Blenderm, they do stick out, so they have a tendency to catch on things where that method may not. It may be just slippery enough to go right through to the other end. Now that you've done all that, and I know you're cutting it off, and something has happened. I've had this happen where I'm pulling the Blenderm off, and I've got one on the other, and I didn't pull the Blenderm totally off, and I went to go disconnect them, and guess what?
Oh,
boom,
what?
Out come the wires.
Worked too well.
Yeah, it did. It held it together, and as a result, the wires, I'm holding probably 2 out of the 3, so now I got one that's in there and the other 2, and maybe because I've been tugging on them and they just got loose, but those wires are really super thin. There's only about 4 or 5 braids, the wire inside your servo wires. They're not really high energy wires or, high voltage wires.
Right.
So now we're looking at having to repair a servo lead.
Oof.
And I know that I have a set already, but I know you were all excited, and we had a mishap there at your place with some servos on your Bixler.
Had some servos bust loose, and it's a tight fit, and you'd have to do some surgery, and it was just easier to get a crimping tool, and that's what I ended up getting. And
they
I
work
finally
really
got around
well
to getting one, but it's going to be really nice because now I can just put on new ends. I can make my own servo leads to any length that I want, which will be fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to it. And it really wasn't that expensive. I kind of did just a little bit of research, and we'll probably put it in the show notes. But I did some research. That crimping tool costs maybe anywhere from $12 to $20 depending on what you get. But I got a really nice one, believe it or not, from Walmart of all places. Got to my house in 2 days. I think it cost me a whopping $15, and everybody was happy about it. So I haven't played with it too much, but I'm really looking forward to finally get adding that to my edition. Yeah,
it makes it really really convenient to be able to make the servo lead to the exact length you need.
Right.
Because I have several airplanes where I have, I'm digging through my box, and the only thing I have is an 18-inch, servo lead. And it's going to get, and all I need is 4 inches. Yeah. I only need 4 inches, so I have to wad this thing up and stuff it somewhere. And, the glider was one of those where I had way more extension than what I needed. So it does make it nice. I have a set as well. They're ratcheting crimpers. And then you can get the actual servo, not the wires, but the connectors. You can buy the servo connectors. Usually if you look around online, you can get them in a bundle. Like I bought a whole bag full of them, and then they gave me the 3 pins as well. So it makes it very convenient. It works really quickly, and you just strip the wire, stick them in there, crimp it, shove the thing on there, and you're good to go.
Another tool, you just got me thinking here that, because like this crimper, I probably should have bought it years ago.
Yeah.
But so one of the things that I bought that I'm really glad that I got early on is a pair of Z-bend pliers for making the Z-bends for the push rods. And sure, you could do it with a pair of pliers or whatever other funky things you have at the house. But I tell you what, the Z-bend pliers are a must. It just makes your life so much easier by having these things. And once again, it's only, $15, $10 for this thing, but you will use it for a whole bunch of things. And it's just really nice to have.
That's one of the first purchases I actually made was a Z-bend. I think it was
you're a very smart man.
I know, right? Yeah. I when we started flying the blue core foamy stuff and we were just using, just the piano wire, and I would just
or coat hangers.
Yeah, or coat hangers or whatever. I could just grab whatever wire, crimp it with that Z-bend and just shove it right into the servo horn, and I was good to go. And it was convenient because I could make it as long or as small as I needed it. And the hard part is making it 90 degrees to each other. You got to make sure that it's going the right direction so that it lays.
You definitely have to give some think. You have to think about that.
Yeah.
If you're doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because I had one that was 90 degrees to the other, and that made it a little difficult. Instead of being on the, both of them up and down, I had one up and down and one side to side. So it didn't quite fit. And I'm like, how did this work? How did I get this to figure out? It wouldn't fit in the servo. And I realized that I had, grabbed the wire, turned it, and crimped it, and it crimped the wrong way. So grab a coat hanger, snip off the 2 ends with your pair of pliers, and then just practice, bending the Z-bends all the way through it. You'll get the hang of it. But they're very, very convenient for, for making just direct connections. If you're not going to use a keeper that has the, it goes into where the hole where you can adjust it.
Oh, well, yeah, I recommend those too for connectors
servo
and
keepers.
stuff. Those are nice.
Yeah,
but still, I usually Z-bend the end that's, going to the moving part. And then I'll use the keeper on the servo end. And that way I can move the push rod, to whatever length I need.
Right.
It works out pretty well that way.
And while you're talking about that, there's different size piano wire that you can buy, obviously, for the type of flying that you do. And not all of them are the same size as your servo horn holes.
Nope.
As a matter of fact, there's several times when I'm like, it's not fitting. So at first I was taking a lighter and heating up the wire and just shoving it through because it's plastic and it'll melt, right? So I'd hold the wire with a pair of pliers, heat it up till it was red hot, and right through the hole. But I realized that because of the heat, it would make the hole bigger than the wire now. And so I had a lot of slop in between the wire and the hole. So there's a neat tool that you need to grab if you don't already have them, but they're called a pen drill.
Pin drill, pin vise.
Pin drill.
Yes.
Yeah. And what it is it's a little handheld drill bit, basically. And it's very precise. You can buy them. Jay has a kit, and it has, 5 or 6 of them in there?
Yes, it has 5.
So it's got a big knob on the top part of it, and then it's got this drill bit on the bottom, and you can, put it where you need it and then just turn it a couple of times. It's very super sharp. It'll bite into that plastic, and it will actually create a hole that's exactly the size of your wire. Now, when I got mine, that's what I was using it for. But when we were building the Stuka, it worked for many things. I watched Jay use it for putting holes in where the servo screws go into. And, it helps drill a partial hole when you have a block for the servos to, like when you're going to drill down into the wood.
That's right, because wood will split if you
it does split.
pre-make or pre-drill a hole. It will split on you.
So it was really kind of cool. I watched him do it, but he would drill. First of all, he has these blocks that the servos sit on these blocks, and you glue the block to this cover, and then the cover goes into the wing. So the servo is not actually in the wing. It's actually sitting on the cover that's mounted to the wing. So there's these 2 blocks that go right up underneath the servo that hold it into place, and you have to CA or epoxy those on. and then you mark the top where the 4 screws in the servo go, and these are standard size servos, so they're rather large, and they have a pretty good like 8mm screw or something that goes into it. So he used the pin vise, the smaller size pin vise, and started the hole, and then took CA glue and put it into the hole to harden the wood. And then when he screwed the screw down in there, it had something to bite against it. It was hardwood. It had CA in there that strengthened it, and it didn't split. And I didn't do that on one of my builds, and actually had to wind up replacing those blocks because they split right in half. Because I just screwed the screw. It's a self-tapping screw, right? You just think, oh, I'll just screw this down in there, and it'll go right into the block.
It's some more power.
Yeah. So now my problem is that I've got this little cover. It was on the Pitts S12. I have the little cover, and half of the little block is still glued to the cover. So I got to get all that off, and it's epoxied on there. So I'm stripping that, and chipping it away. And I got my Dremel tool trying to get all the gunk off of it before I can put another one on there and get it to sit flat. So live by our mistakes, folks, and, get yourself some pen drills, and then, make life easy on yourself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it made it easy on the Stuka as well as we were building it, because Jay just drilled down a couple of those and put the screws in, and it made quick work of it, and actually a really nice install. Everything was all lined up, and everything fit perfect. So it looked really, really good once he got done with the servo covers. But after he got all that stuff done, I was up front working on the nose portion of it. And we were missing another tool that was probably very important to have in your toolbox.
What could that possibly be, Mike?
I have one, and I know you do too, but it was lost in a box somewhere. But you definitely, folks, need a prop reamer. You got to have a prop reamer. The APC prop that came with the kit is very hard plastic, and getting it to fit on the actual prop stem was not an easy task without a prop reamer. It took me a long time to figure out finally how to get it on there. A lot of sandpaper.
Yeah, and you got to realize, folks, before we got that to the point where Mike was doing that, I think it was the day before, the evening before, I was already, first going in with the drill bit, making sure it wasn't too much, too little.
Right.
Got it reamed, did a little bit more. I got it to the part where you could get it just barely on the motor, but the screw pattern for it was just larger, just by a bit. And I'm like, oh, I can't use none of my other drill bits work, or they're just a little bit too large, and I don't want to go too large. You can't get that material back. And I was at a standstill, And once again, I think it was late and I wasn't thinking. And, it's one of those things I turned to Mike, oh, we're stuck. I can't find my reamer. We're doomed. And he's like, just give me some sandpaper. It was kind of like one of those weird things, give me a tube of glue, some sandpaper, and, some Yankee ingenuity, fella, snap to, and I'm like, huh? Oh, okay. And, I got him the stuff that he needed, and he's like, whittle. There's a little sandpaper. Shh, there it is. It's on there, fella. Let's go. I'm like, wow. I couldn't figure my way out of that one. So that was pretty impressive, Mike.
That was pretty funny. But, it just wouldn't fit. It would start to spin onto that first little screw, and then it would just fall off. And you got to be careful, folks, because if you start to screw it on there and it bites into that plastic and starts putting screw grooves into your prop, it could go on crooked.
Yep.
And then now it's going to be wobbly. Now, or it'll get all the way to the edge, which doesn't have screw patterns on it, and then it won't go on there because it's kind of bit into that plastic. So what I did is I basically took some, what was that, 150, 200 grit? It wasn't a high grit. It was
like 150.
So it was like 80 to 150, and I rolled it up into a little tube. I think I had a screwdriver. And I rolled it onto the screwdriver to where it was just big enough to fit in the hole. And then I just rotated the screwdriver around, and it would take some of that off to where it would get loose and would stop sanding. I'd pull it out, wrap another piece around it, start sanding it as it went in there. It took me about 10 minutes, I think, but I just sanded out enough of it to where it would slide right on, and it was perfect. It just fit perfectly. So I got the prop all sanded up, ready to put on, got the cowling all measured up. And in case you don't know how to put a cowling on, or you haven't done one before, there's little tabs on the side of the fuselage that line up with where the screws go. And the best way to do that is to take some blue painter's tape and tape from the fuselage, somewhere in the middle of the fuselage, somewhere like towards the front of the fuselage, over that tab. Take your little pin drill and drill a hole in the blue painter's tape and start a hole in the little tab. Do that on all 4 tabs. Pull the, just kind of, once you do it, the tape kind of hangs off, and then you slide the cowling on and then bring the tape back in place. So now when the cowling's all lined up, the tape is holding the cowling in place, and now you have marks for where you need to drill the holes in your cowling. So I had measured all of that, got it all set up. It looked really good. I drilled all my holes and got it all set up to where it looked really fabulous. Went to go put the prop on, and what am I doing now? I'm looking around for that another tool that we needed to put in the box, a prop wrench.
Yes.
And folks, I have the greatest prop wrench in the world. I left it at Jay's for a while. He used it, but it's basically a Robart tool. It pretty much fits almost every nut out there, both American size or millimeters, metric size. And they're just these little cutout holes, and you just take it. It's a really flat wrench, and you can just put it on there and you can, spin it around. Now, the reason that I say to get a prop wrench is because this when you just have an airplane and your prop is exposed, it's no big deal. Grab a pair of pliers, put the nut on, or grab a wrench and put the nut on. It's no big deal. But when you have a spinner that now has to be lined up with these holes, you've got to get your prop on. You've got to be able to hold the prop in the right position, get the nut screwed on so that your spinner will now match up with the holes on the other side, and your spinner can go on. If you don't have a way to hold the motor and the prop wrench, it's troublesome. So Jay didn't have a prop wrench, or it was in a box somewhere.
So let's just say it took you a little bit of time. Hey, you weren't going anywhere anyway. It wasn't like we had a date, or we had to meet the wives or something. So
No, I didn't. It
gave us lots of time, a lot of bonding time to sit there and curse at each other.
That's true.
Where's your prop wrench? In a box somewhere. Help yourself. Go start looking through boxes.
Well, I wound up actually. Luckily, Jay had a pair of needle nose pliers that had a bend. So I don't know what you call those, but they're kind of a bend. It goes out and then makes like a 90-degree bend. So I was able to actually get inside the cowling and hold the motor, and then I used just a pair of regular pliers and I held the prop and he cinched it down. And then by the time, we got the prop lined up and everything fit perfectly, it was good to go. But a prop wrench is definitely one of those tools that if you don't have it in your bag, go get one. Robart, I think we talked about it in our Christmas episode, but this just came back to just kind of bite us because I really would have liked to have one. It would have made my life much easier.
Yep. Well, definitely it's a nice Christmas stuffer for, like we were talking before, from the Christmas episode. That's definitely something to throw in your little, easy to get something for the wife. You can leave that picture of it out somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so there's another thing, because while I was doing all this, obviously you have to get your electronics wired up, and the ESC is one of the main things with the motor, and Jay was working on that. One of the things that, once again, we both have these, but it wasn't out and made our life miserable, is a soldering jig. And we have some really very super nice soldering jigs. You put the ends down in there and it holds them and you can clamp them, and we got a third hand. Jay was doing it all with a pair of pliers and a screwdriver, but I'm not knocking his soldering skills, because they were fabulous. He does a really good job soldering. Matter of fact, I'd much rather him solder than me, because I'm not as good at it. But the jig definitely makes your life better because you can actually, it's like having 3 sets of hands. You know, you can put the end in and you can have something holding the wire, and then you can concentrate on the soldering pencil and the solder, and you can kind of get everything where you need it. Where, you know, Jay's doing it on the table and having to hold his eye right and his mouth right and, you know, left and right on his fingers.
Yeah,
to get everything to kind of measure up.
You know, folks, you had to see where we were working. You know, what we didn't exactly have enough light. So the nice part was the way the floor was. You didn't lose things if you dropped it on the floor per se, but because of the way the light was so poor, or it was also it's a hardwood floor that's out there, and so you drop things. We had these little washers, and you think you drop a washer is going to land right there, but these little things would land right up perfectly on their edge, and they would roll like 10 feet, forever. 15 feet. And I'm like, I just hit my foot, so I should be sitting right next to my foot. And he's like, "Yeah, there's nothing down there." And, you know, we get up and go get something to drink, and we're like, hey, what are the washers doing almost out of the room? It was amazing.
Now, thank goodness for the light on the back of my iPhone 7, though, because that was a saving grace. I could shine it across the floor, and it would reflect all those little
That's
parts.
True.
And we're talking microscopic, you know, nuts and bolts and washers and stuff. They're not big ones. They were really, really tiny. Because they went to all the hinges for the ailerons and the flaps.
Right.
So, anyway, they made it halfway across the floor occasionally. We had to go chase them. So another thing that, speaking of flaps and hinges and that kind of thing, is another thing that you should probably put in your toolbox that'll make your life a whole lot easier is one of those clear, I call them a pipper.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically a long tube, and you can stick it in thin CA, and you squeeze it. It's got a bulb on the end of it. And you suck up all the CA. And Jay's laughing at me.
Well, I'm laughing at you because you seem to have an affinity for CA. For closing wounds that you have, you know, at a moment. Oops, slice myself open. Give me some of that CA, slap it on the wound. I'm good to go, Mr. Moan. But yeah, that night or that particular evening, you know, I know we're getting a little older and our eyes just aren't as good. But it was kind of funny. You know, Mike's trying to put a drop, like just a teeny tiny drop, just a drop of CA on something. And then next thing I know, he's like, you know, I hear this noise. Are you kidding me? And, you know, and he'd be holding up his arm, and like the CA would be running down his forearm, you know, as he was trying to apply that drop with, you know, that was thin CA, and it just all was dribbling out and going down his arm. So, Mike was close to, you know, gluing his arm, you know, CA on the back of the plane. So I was like, Mike, get the pipper, suck it out of the jar, and just put a drop or two. I don't think you need half a bottle.
Okay. So the hard part is that he has a big bottle of CA. I mean, this thing is probably 4 or 5 ounces maybe.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's almost the same size as the epoxy, to be honest with you. So anyway, I'm using this stuff, and Jay's right. We should have put like a shop light or something in there, because it was really dim and dark, and it's early in the morning, and we're trying to, you know, keep quiet because everybody's sleeping. But I literally, the tip of this thing, it hardens very quickly. And so I'm like trying to see if there's a drop coming out, but it's actually coming down out of the little dripper part, and then down the bottle, down my hand, down my elbow, and my elbow's on the table. So I literally am gluing myself without knowing it, because it's too dark in there. I'm gluing myself to the table, and I'm like, why is it that I can't get this drop to come out? So I squeeze a little harder, and then it all just kind of gushes out because that little tip now comes loose, and I get more CA than I need, and now it's running down the airplane. And so as I go to catch it and wipe it off the airplane, I can't lift my elbow off the table because I've obviously CA'd my elbow back to the table. And I know we did a whole glue episode on me CAing myself to everything. And so I was like, are you kidding me? And Jay's like, what's the matter? I go, my elbow is glued to the table. And so he's like, here. He picks the wing of the airplane up, and my thumb is now glued to the side of the airplane. So I have one wing in this hand, you know, my left hand, and it's glued to my thumb, and then my elbow is glued to the table. It was a fiasco. He's like, all right, we just need to stop because you're getting glue all over the airplane.
That's right.
All over yourself, all over my mom's couch. We got to stop. So I think we called it a night after that once
Yeah.
I glued myself to a couple of items.
That's right.
Luckily,
So, folks, as a little note, remember if you can see your veins in your forearm popping out because you're squeezing the tube of CA, you might want to stop because no good can come of that. So
and get a light and get a better light.
Yes,
or magnifying glass or something. But better yet, just get the little pippers because they work amazing. They can get into little bitty places. You can take that pen drill and you can make a little hole and drop it in there, and it'll soak your hinges. If you need to get into a real tight space, it'll do that too, and it just puts a little bitty drop on there. And the good news is, if the tip actually hardens, you just take your knife and cut it. And
you just cut it off because they give you what I want to say like a 5 millimeter, 10 millimeter.
Yeah, it's a little tail that sticks out of the.
So as it hardens, you just
it's long.
keep cutting it off and keep going.
Well. And then when you get done, you can just squirt it all back into the bottle, and you're good to go. So it does make it made my life much better the next day whenever I was able to use that, because he actually went and got it and said, "Oh, here, use this." I'm like,
as we were trying to explain to my mother why her table's all, her antique table's all glued.
I know, right?
Hey, we fixed your table. What was wrong with it?
Well, on top of that, the only other thing I can think of right off the top of my head is a file. Files are great. You don't really think about it, but you can have several different types. You can actually have the metal file that you would normally use.
How big of a file?
Not a little one. I use my wife has those emery boards.
Oh,
and I just grab one or two of those, and it makes it really good for deburring. Some of the corners, or like if you had a hinge that doesn't fit quite right, you can just run it across the hinge, and it'll take a little bit of that balsa wood off, and it doesn't really gouge it a whole lot. You can use it for the cowling. Sometimes like on your cowling, when I put the screws through. The screw actually punches through, and then it leaves that fiberglass extended on the other side.
Right, a little burr on the other side.
Right, and so you can take that little file and you can just file the burr off, and then that way it fits a little bit better, and you can find that hole. Because with the burr in there, it's very difficult when you slide the cowling on to line those holes up. But if it's missing, you can actually slide the cowling; it'll fit flat. You can see the hole behind the one in the cowling, so you can match them up. But it does a lot of stuff. It would have helped out, your file. You can do it inside the prop, or if you have like on your ACP prop that we put on there, it had a real like sharp edge on it. You can just take that file and go right down the edge of that and kind of take some of that raw edge off where it's a little more smooth. It doesn't really hurt anything. You're going to balance the prop anyway, but it does make for a little bit smoother prop and doesn't have that extra material that when they cut it. You can get it off of there. Same thing with some of the, I know you were using a knife and some other stuff to make sure that the servos would fit in the holes, and you had to cut away some of that balsa wood.
I did.
And you can do the same thing. You cut it away with a knife. It's not quite as round as what you want it to be. You grab some sandpaper and just sanded it out, but a file would have been just as easy, almost as fast. So that, for my book, I have a couple of those. They go right in there with my popsicle sticks for mixing, glues and epoxies. The popsicle sticks make great addition to your toolbox as well. Just grab a bag of them from Michael's or wherever, and they're great for. Sometimes you can use them to strengthen, your balsa wood airplane. I've had one where I found a stringer that was, or a rib that was cracked. I just put some CA on there, took my forceps, shoved it in there, and glued it right to the balsa wood and made it kind of a joiner.
Yeah, I like to use them for foam planes. Like if you break them in half, or like you said, you bend up a wing, and I'll just gouge. I'll break those things off or cut them in half or something, and make a slot, stick them in, or cut a slot and slot them in, and just go over it with some lightweight spackle or something, or just stick them into the wing and glue it together, and it holds it in really nice.
Yeah. Well, the good news is we got the Stuka all put together. We actually ran it up, but unfortunately I ran out of time and had to get back home and go to work. So we didn't get the maid in it.
Yeah, we didn't. And unfortunately it's only been, 8,000 degrees outside. So yeah. I haven't had a real inkling to fly it. So, cause I don't want to die outside. So It's going to have to just wait until winter comes or something here. I don't know. Texas how that works.
I actually took a picture of the Stuka there and at your place along with the P51, and I'll post it as the cover art for this.
Cool.
So everybody can kind of see what it looks like next to the P51. It would have been really cool. I didn't bring my radio this time, but it would have been really cool to basically go out there and fly the P51 and the Stuka together. That would have been kind of nice because they're both about the same size.
Sounds like one of our brilliant ideas are brewing
I know,
right
there. So it's definitely going to make me want to come down there again and check it out because it was a really good field and it was in a great location. Once again, Mr. Wynn has done a great job, letting you guys use that property, and Jim and his crew have done a good job. And then you and I got to do a little bit of, I guess you did most of it, but I supervised you doing a little cleanup work with the benches and stuff. So
right.
Yeah.
So just doing a little maintenance out there. Since I didn't get to help the guys mow the field, there's like some benches and things that are out there. So I decided to they're metal. So I decided to go over them with a wire brush and I'm going to grab some spray paint and repaint them and do some stuff to kind of spruce those things up and get them out there for the fellas so everybody can use them. So just doing my part to help out the field. Like I said, I got a windsock for out there so we could use. So it's going to be really nice once that field we bring it back to life again. It's going to be nice.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. I'll have to come out there on a weekend where I can meet all the guys. So
Absolutely.
while we were down there, I got to fly the glider.
You did.
Radiant XL. And we kind of messed around with that a little bit and got the CG just right and then chased some buzzards around. And that was really fun. We finally figured out we actually put the ASX3 module that you had in there. We finally got to work.
Yeah.
So
that was real nice. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh, and you also tried to take my Tough Wing into space or something. Yeah.
I did. Yeah. The Tough Wing, I was out flying the Tough Wing and Jay was messing around with something else. And I started climbing that thing and I was chasing these buzzards that just got into thermals and just went way up. I mean, you could barely see them. And I kept climbing. And it kept, I was chasing these things basically was what I was doing. And I shouldn't have been, but they got me a little too far out and a little too high up. And we lost signal, which was very interesting because luckily for me, I wasn't doing anything stupid, like headed to the ground or tumbling it or anything like that. I just was cruising along with these buzzards in a big circle, and I went to go a different direction, and it didn't go. So it just kept flying wings level, luckily. I don't know why I thought this was going to help, but I obviously was out of range for whatever that receiver was that we had in there. And I yelled over at Jay, "Hey, I lost the signal." And I started running like I was going to catch this thing or run towards it. And he's like, "Where are you going?"
Oh, it was hilarious, folks.
It was kind of funny, but I don't know why my brain thought if I ran to be closer to it, because I knew it was going away from me. The further it got away from me, the more chance I had of not getting it back.
Right.
And it was going to cross the river or whatever, and it was going to go way out of the flying area. And so Jay's like, "What can I do?" So both of us kind of took off running, but it came back a little bit, and I got it kind of headed back towards me before I lost the signal again. And luckily it was just kind of cruising down and, it's a little bit heavier. The motor had shut off and it was just kind of coming to the ground. And right before we had any drastic things happen, I got it back and it finally just landed in a field. I brought it down and just set it down in the field.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I was ready to say the funny part is you're over there, yanking on the sticks and moving them all around. And of course, it came back to life just as you're doing that. Right. Come on, please. And the motor just comes on, and of course, Mike's going in all directions with the sticks, and it's just like spin the dial. Okay, there it is. Go that direction, yeah, and that's exactly what it was. Just kind of gently coming down, and then it just was like a bag of cats. It just was kind of crazy. And Mike was able to recover that bag of cats and at least set it down gently in the field. So,
well, it wasn't too gently. It still hit on the nose, but it did.
But I mean, it didn't come. Another one of our Tough Wings came down nose first from just 100 feet, and it was rather dramatic. And this one, at least you got semi wings level. So I mean, it hit hard, but I mean, at least it was a controlled crash or mishap.
Yeah,
no
but my tough wing came down at over 100 miles an hour straight down, vertical. It hit the ground so hard that the battery ejected like 20 feet from the crash site, and it made all of the carbon fiber rods inside the tough wing turn to
dust.
Powder. Literally dust. It was amazing. But fixing it was amazing because all I did was pour glue down in there and it hardened up. So it's still just dust. The dust kind of came back together in the glue. It worked out really well. So, but anyway. And then lastly, we got to fly your riffraff. Don't want to spend too much time on that one.
Yeah. Well, it's a model from Hobby King. I got it in one of their specials. I paid $50 for it delivered or something to my house. So, I mean, I got a great deal on it. And you had his cousin or his twin brother.
Right.
You had the Sea Fury, and I think that was a Christmas gift that I got you one time. And it was a really nice model. Bomb drops, the bombs could come off, and, full lights, full flaps, it was retractable gear, great detail. It was a great looking model. The riffraff is supposed to be a faster version, a racing version of it. No bombs, no anything, kind of a cool paint job on it. We got that sucker together and went to go fly, was flying. Now, first of all, something with the gears kind of off, meaning the angle of the gear. You have to be really, really on the sticks to take this thing off. And I just couldn't get it. And there's a little bit of a trick to it because the tail comes off the ground immediately and it just wants to go over on its nose. And so you have to be really on the sticks to keep it in that happy medium, I guess. So we tried several times. I just couldn't get it. And then finally we just sucked up the gear. Full coals, and Mike just hand launched it for me. And we kind of got it trimmed out. I was flying it in, was doing a couple approaches, dropped the flaps, was coming in, was still kind of high. I came in again. And when I kind of went around again, I think I got the plane too slow and, I got it into a stall. And at that time, it was just a treetop level, got behind a tree, couldn't see it. I cracked it in half. So.
Well, it's amazing though, because it split the nose.
Yeah.
But it really didn't mess up the wings or the tail section.
No, it's repairable. I can make a Franken riffraff. It'll look I can get it back to where it'll be flyable again, but it just was disappointing, first model, and then you crash it like that. So that was a little disappointing, but there's obvious that that model wasn't very well thought through. And there are some problems with it, as I've been reading in the blogs, other people's blogs and stuff. So we're not both Mike and I, since we've both lost this model, there's obviously there's some things that are wrong with it. And, it's unfortunate because it was a really nice model. But, unfortunately Avios or whatever is now out of business. So it's obvious that,
they made 100,000 of those things, took their money and ran.
Yeah. They were gone. So on the other hand, for me, it was only $50, so it wasn't that bad. And even if I can't get the plane together, I still have all the parts, servos, and whatever. And that, I pretty much get all my money back. But like I said, it was just a little bit disappointing. But she'll fly again. We'll see what happens.
And then lastly, we flew the Eagle.
Oh, that's right. You got a chance to fly my EPP Eagle. Like I said. It looks good in the air when it's flying, it's kind of cool. But as for how I imagined it would be as a glider, it's got a lot to be desired. I had to do so many modifications to it,
So now that I've flown it, because we talked about this airplane in a previous podcast, and I will tell you now that I'm going to second your opinion that I don't think this is a very good beginner airplane.
No.
The airplane does take a little bit of skill to fly it. And having said that, I did a couple of loops and rolls with it, much to Jay's, laughter over there watching me do this.
Yeah, that was quite humorous.
But they did work out. We were able to get it up. It doesn't glide quite like a glider, and it doesn't really climb like I feel it should. So maybe that's a battery motor combo we can talk about later. But it does have some idiosyncrasies to it. Who knows? You laminated that whole airplane, and maybe that put enough weight into it. I didn't really feel like it's that heavy, but maybe that changed something in it. I don't know.
I doubt it, because I used like one of the lightest laminates. It's like 1.7 mils. So it's a bad design. I just
It was fun to fly, and it was great chasing. It was great chasing the buzzards around, because that was the one airplane they were interested in the most. When we got high enough, those buzzards, come over there and take a look at that thing, because it's all painted to look like an eagle. And then once they kind of look at it, or you hit the throttle and to climb up, then they'd go, "Oh, that's not real," and they'd
they disperse. But no, it's like I said, it's one of those models you get and you're really hopeful for. And then once I started getting my teeth into it, I'm like, this isn't for a beginner. Even for a more advanced person, it just, you had to do so many modifications to it just to get it to where it could fly. It just, and even flying it just isn't as enjoyable as I thought it would be. So I just, it's going to be probably the next swap meet or something I go to. I'll be getting rid of that model, I think.
Well, let me tell you, folks, it was a great trip. We had a good time, despite the fact that Jay and I stayed up too late and caught a cold. But we did have a good time building airplanes. We hope that some of these tools that you can put in your box will help your life, become better when you're building, or at least assembling, airplanes. I know most everything is coming almost ready to fly now, but a lot of these little things that we talked about will just make it go that much faster. So. And for Jim and those guys that are listening to us, man, you guys did a great job with that field. I wish I could have met you guys. I'll do it next time I come down. I'm already planning another trip down there. This time I'm bringing my radio. But it was a good time, and we were excited to go down there and be a part of it. So, but that's it for tonight, folks. We kind of run out of time. Please email us with your questions, comments, or concerns, or any topics or suggestions that you might have,
or tools that you may have or discovered yourself. Yeah, so let us know.
Absolutely,
get a discussion going. We don't, as always, we don't know everything. If you haven't figured that out,
well, almost. We don't know almost everything. I don't know. We're still learning. We like to learn as well. So, give us a star rating and review on iTunes. Now stick with us, and hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right, folks. Get out there flying.
Yep. I know, despite the heat, get out there and fly.
Fortunately, you're not somewhere you explode when you go outside. So if you're not, get out there and have a good time.
Absolutely. All right. Well, have a good night. We'll see you later.
See ya.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.